Already on September 10th, 2022, Prince Charles was proclaimed king as His Majesty Charles III. Now his coronation will take place on May 6, 2023. We look at the coronation chart from the perspective of electional astrology. Elections are about finding an astrologically auspicious time for an undertaking. We address the questions: is this a good time for his coronation from an astrological point of view? What special features does the horoscope have in store? Has an astrologer perhaps been commissioned for a favorable choice of date? And what about the lunar eclipse that takes place just before? Be sure to stick around until the end, because as a bonus, we'll give you a summary of some important rules you should follow during elections. The coronation ceremony of His Majesty Charles III begins at 11 a.m. local time in Westminster, England, and therefore we created this chart that reflects that time and place. A general thought on elections beforehand. There is often not the perfect time. The art of choosing auspicious dates is to place the key influences in the chart in a favorable way. These are often the ascendant and the most important houses and planets for the election. Let us see to what extent this has been achieved for the coronation chart. Particularly striking in this horoscope is the fact that a lunar eclipse took place shortly before. It is only a penumbral eclipse, so it is not so clearly visible, but astrologically it is a difficult aspect, an opposition of sun and moon. You can see this well here in the chart. The sun and moon are in opposite signs. The sun in Taurus and the moon in Scorpio. They're about 9 degrees apart, and the moon is already moving away from the sun, and its light will soon begin to diminish. In Scorpio, in the sign of its fall, the moon has no dignities at all. That is, it is badly placed there, and its effects are of a problematic and radical nature. So we have several difficult factors, the opposition of the lights and the difficult lunar position involved here. So, from an astrological point of view, this is not to be considered favorable. What is the significance of the moon? Traditionally, it can stand for the people in general, or more specifically, for mothers or women. It is in the 4th house, which stands for home, origin, and family, especially the father. Mundane astrologically, that is, in relation to social and worldly affairs, the 4th house, according to the rules of traditional astrology, can also stand for the people in a country, or for democratic structures, namely by being opposite and thus in opposition to the 10th house, which is about government or aristocracy. Interestingly enough, the sun is in opposition to the moon in the 10th house, which makes this opposition even clearer when you consider that the sun in the horoscope can symbolically stand for the king or ruler. As one of the two lights, the other is the sun, the moon is particularly important in elections as the celestial body that moves the fastest and is closest to the earth. From a Kabbalistic astrological point of view, the moon describes on the one hand what we are receptive to, and how and in which area of life this receptivity expresses itself, and on the other hand, through its correspondence to the Sephirah Yesod. It is the mediator of the higher forces. These flow into Yesod and reach Malchut, that is, the material world. With regard to the effect of the moon, we also look at the phase of the moon to decide whether it is a favorable or unfavorable time for the project. The simple rule is that if something is to become more, such as earning more money in a new job, the moon should be waxing. If something is to become less, such as weight loss, it should be waning. In the case of a coronation, we would definitely want the moon to be waxing, just as dignity should be waxing or the positive consequences of incumbency should be waxing. Here we have a point in time shortly after a lunar eclipse, that is, a full moon, and the moon, as said, is already moving away from the sun. You see this here in the chart. It has already progressed a few degrees further in the sign of Scorpio, and is at 24 degrees. The sun in the sign Taurus is still at 15 degrees. That is, the moon is beginning to wane. A full moon is considered a potent and energetic time in principle, yet the prevailing influences are difficult to handle because the earth is in a state of tension as the sun and moon form an opposition. And since the moon has already begun to enter its waning phase, this reduces its positive influences regarding this choice of date. It is also very interesting in this context that at the time of the oath taking, On September 10th, 2022, when Charles III was proclaimed king, there was also a sun-moon opposition, that is, a full moon. You can see this here in the chart of the proclamation of September 10th, 2022, drawn for the moment of Charles III's swearing in at 10:25 a.m. local time in London, Buckingham Palace. Let us return to the coronation chart. There are some traditional astrological sources in which rules are formulated specifically for elections relating to kings or rulers. Two rules are interesting for our consideration. The first is found in many traditional sources and refers to the degree or sign in which an eclipse occurred in the year of the election for a king or ruler. There was a total solar eclipse on April 20th, though not visible in London, which occurred in the last degree of Aries, so very shortly before the change to the sign of Taurus, where the sun is now in the coronation chart. This criterion is therefore fulfilled by the coronation horoscope. Another rule concerning a coronation, which is found in Guido Bonatti, refers to the ascendant, which should be in the sign of Leo. Here the sign in which the sun rules, and that is a fixed sign and therefore stands for stability, is emphasized. This is the case in the coronation horoscope of Charles III. The lion here is meant to emphasize the royal character. On the coat of arms of the royal family, we also find a lion, which, as the so-called king of beasts, is supposed to emphasize the majestic position. Interestingly, in the chart of the proclamation, which we have just briefly looked at with regards to the sun-moon opposition, we find the cusp of the 10th house, that is, the medium coeli, in the sign of Leo. Back to the traditional rules in the coronation chart. It is also said that the sun should be placed in Taurus, which is also a fixed sign and an earth sign that additionally suggests stability and a connection to earthly themes. In addition, the sun is said to be in the 10th house. The 10th house represents rulership, fame, and success, and these factors are also present in the coronation chart. Was there perhaps an astrologer commissioned by the royal house to choose the date who knew these rules? What does not apply, however, is the instruction found in several traditional sources that the sun and moon should be in a favorable aspect to each other, that is, in sextile or trine. As already described in detail, we have an opposition and also a lunar eclipse, which can be considered unfavorable, so this point does not apply here. Generally, also positive influencing factors in this horoscope are Jupiter and Venus, both planets that are considered classic benefactors and thus contribute a supportive quality. Jupiter, along with the Sun, is also prominently placed in the 10th house. Jupiter represents growth and order as well as morals and values, and also generosity in general. It can thus have a successful effect on fame, success, and status. Venus is placed in the 11th house. This a traditionally very positive place in the chart. Here we find community ideals, hopes, good fortune, and generally supportive factors for the matter. Another positive factor is that Venus and Jupiter form a sextile, that is, a harmonious aspect with a favorable character. Incidentally, the two planets that are considered classic malefics from a traditional astrological perspective, Saturn and Mars, are in the 12th and 8th house in the horoscope. Traditionally, the 8th and 12th houses are seen as dark and bad places, since they, amongst other things, mean death, decay, and anxiety, the 8th house, and sorrow, misery, secrets, and hidden things, the 12th house. However, they do not form difficult aspects such as square or opposition with the Sun, the ascendant, Jupiter or Venus, and are thus not particularly connected with the essential horoscope factors, which in turn limits their impact. From a Kabbalistic perspective, Saturn corresponds to the spiritual principle of Binah, the Sephirah, which stands for self-restraint, discipline, and seriousness. Mars corresponds to the spiritual principle of Gevurah, which is the Sephirah that stands for courage and willpower. Both Sephirot sometimes have a difficult reputation because they are on the pillar of austerity, and thus stand for the limiting forces of the universe. We also find this principle in a figurative form in traditional astrology, where, depending on their position, they are judged to be malefics in their astral mode of action. From a Kabbalistic point of view, however, it must be said that the limiting forces are also important influencing factors. For example, the passive limiting quality of Binah helps a force to work. Similarly, a riverbed that limits a stream of water ensures that it does not ebb away and can flow powerfully in one direction. or the active limiting quality of Gevurah helps us to courageously and effectively confront and contain an evil. Depending on the position of the planets, either the virtues or the vices are expressed, that is, the positive or negative effects. Mars is here in Cancer in the fall, a difficult position for him, so we can expect more negative effects like anger, aggression, or even nervousness or fear, the qualities of Mars that we describe as vices. If a traditionally oriented astrologer was involved in the choice of date, he tried, according to a classical rule, to make Mars weak from his house position. That is, to place him in one of the cadent houses. Thus, the placement in the 12th house, which is considered a cadent house, therefore does not seem entirely inappropriate. Now we have created an overview for you in which some important rules for elections are summarized. We're inserting them here for you. You can now look at the coronation chart for yourself and consider to what extent they apply, and in your opinion, if this is a successful election, or if the timing seems rather unfavorable from an astrological point of view. Write to us your assessment in the comments. If you want to learn more about astrology, elections, and horoscope interpretation, check out our free course page. We also offer training in Kabbalistic Astrology. We link everything in the description. You will also find many videos here on the channel and some playlists on different astrological topics. You can start with our video on the introduction to Kabbalistic Astrology. Thank you for joining us until the end of the video. We hope you found the information on elective astrology exciting and valuable. Bye, and hope to see you soon. Take care.